My perspective with making art is that once I release it into the world, it doesn't belong to me anymore, it belongs to the listener.
This week, I'm talking to a singer, songwriter, and one of the most exciting voices in British music right now. She makes R&B that sounds soulful and sun-dappled and is so personal it reads like a diary.
Falling in love, that's like the best thing that ever happens to anyone. Falling in love with my partner. I was very like hot on my sleeve through that process, and like sent her a song that I'd written about her very early and kind of was like, this is how I feel.
She's also writing a novel. Maelstrom had a heated 7-way auction for it. So yeah, she's one of those people that's just incredibly talented in multiple disciplines. We talked about what it feels like to have your music sung back to you, being a big feeler, and what happened when her label told her that her album was only 60% there, and deep down, she knew they were right. Welcome to Character Study. It's Hope Tala.
I have just got a new microphone and I want to make sure that it's like, that I've got it right. Oh, it looks like we have the same one actually.
Sure, girls. Yeah, I love that.
Sure, girls.
Music and memory is just so connected. And I feel like Hope Handwritten is going to be the album that I think about when I think about this summer for me. But I'm really interested to know, when you hear those songs now and that album, like what that represents for you. Tell me where you were in your life when you were writing that album.
I mean, I wrote that album over I want to say 3.5 year period, which is by far the longest that I've taken to write a project, which in some ways it felt weird at the time to be working on it for so long, in a sense, because I just wasn't used to paying such attention for such an extended period of time to an artistic project. But I think looking back now, I'm so grateful to have had all of that time to really work on it and revise it so many times. It went through so many drafts, and I must have tinkered with the track list like hundreds of times, moving songs around, rejigging things. But I was in my, I suppose, like early mid-20s when I was working on the album. I'm now 28, and it really felt like I was making a coming of age album in a way. I was, dealing with heartbreak and then new love, and kind of feeling like I was becoming an adult and adjusting to not being in full-time education anymore after really like thriving in that environment and loving like school and uni and stuff. So just, feeling like I was out in the world for the first time by myself, and also traveling with work and touring and spending a lot of time in Los Angeles, which is I like split my time between there and London. And just, having a lot of new experiences and coming into myself as an adult. So it was a really like amazing experience to be able to like record that time in a body of work. But there were also a lot of kind of difficult times and struggles and growing pains along the way. But it really feels like it charts a really significant time in my life.
It's so beautiful to have a time capsule of such a formative part of your life. Having written a memoir at kind of similar age to you at that time, it is really interesting to go back and look at that. And I'm really pleased that I'll have that as I get older to be able to look back on that. But it's also funny when I do like readings or do events, and people, I guess, will kind of reference like the person I am from reading that. I feel quite distant from that person. I'm a bit more grown up, I suppose, especially having made something where you're asking questions about who you want to become and who you will be. I suppose part of getting towards the end of that process is feeling a little bit more like So when you perform those songs, do you feel at a distance, or do you still feel very much connected to them?
I feel like it really varies depending on the show, depending on the day, and depending on the song. I definitely feel some type of connection to all of my songs, even if they're years and years and years old, and I feel very kind of distant from the experience. I feel like definitely I still feel a connection. But I think when I see other people in a live context interacting with the music and clearly like feeling it themselves, that I think heightens my connection with the song. It's really interesting to kind of experience how different your like connection or relationship with your art changes. Like, it's kind of a beautiful thing that these songs have kind of grown with me, and my perspective on them changing. It's very special, even if sometimes I'm like, oh, this, I can't even remember what I wrote this song about. Sometimes I have that experience where I'm like, wait, how was I even feeling when I wrote this song? But I think like my perspective with making art is that once I release it into the world, it doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to the people who, the listener. So when I get to see the listener like interacting with the music, that's like very, very special, and I think pulls me back into the place I was a bit when I was creating the song.
That's so interesting to hear you say that, because on the last episode that I recorded of this, I used that exact phrase of like, once something's out there, it doesn't belong to you, it belongs to other people. And I think it's really important to be able to have that handing over and allow something to take on a life and a meaning for other people, especially something like music, where you have such a special and deep emotional connection to something at the moment in which you first listen and bond with a song. How fantastic to then have fans have that and have an emotional connection and share that with you, and then that be part of your connection to it. What's it like for when fans start singing music back to you? I mean, that just must be amazing. It's such a unique creative experience.
Every single time it happens, it feels like, newly, there's novelty every time it happens. Even after having played it feels like I played loads of shows at this point, but I played a show in New York a couple of weeks ago, and hearing people sing the lyrics, it just is completely, it's just extraordinary. And my favorite ever experience when I'm playing live is when a group of people have come together. Often it's a group of girls, and they are singing along and they're not even looking at me. Like I might as well not even be there. They're just interacting with each other and like singing the song to each other. And that is my favorite thing when I'm on stage, to just feel like, oh, this like isn't about me at all. Like I might be a small ingredient in this interaction between these people, but it's really about them. And I don't know at all, maybe like the memories they might have made to the song. It might have helped them like bond in some way or whatever, but that's just like so special. And it makes me feel more confident on stage when they're just like ignoring me. And I feel like kind of I'm living vicariously through them in the crowd. But yeah, it's a really amazing thing to experience people singing your songs back to you. And I think particularly in this age of like social media, and we're all just constantly online, having that component to the kind of experience of making music, it has become like even more special, feels even more special, because yeah, it feels like we're all kind of really kind of sinking into this online living experience. And that kind of almost feels like a bit of resistance when you get to play a show, or even when I go to a show like as a listener, and it just, that to me just will never get old, that experience.
How amazing to be the connective tissue between a whole group of friends and this song that's maybe been like an anthem for their friendship or a summer or something hard that they've been through. I think music sometimes can be a fantastic way if people don't really know how to articulate something that they're going through or they're feeling, to send a song to someone. It's very intimate. So it's amazing to imagine that you're that on the WhatsApp group chat.
Exactly. It's very surreal, actually. But yeah, I feel very grateful to have that.
And for that creation process, I suppose to be a singer-songwriter that is as open-hearted as you are in your lyrics and has that kind of vulnerability, you must really have to identify as somebody that's open-hearted. And then you get up on stage and you have to sing it and share it with all these people. So it's like there's these two parts of this process. Maybe is the first part imagining that no one's ever going to listen, and do you have to get in that mindset before you do it? And then almost view performing as something that comes later.
It's definitely a bit of both, because actually having performing in mind can be really useful to the creative process, I think, because I feel like it sometimes encourages me to get out of my comfort zone a bit when I'm writing. And yeah, it just can be good to consider like, okay, I will be playing this song live at some point. How is it going to feel? Is it going to feel like a fun song to sing? Am I going to enjoy singing it? Do I think that people are going to, the audience are going to respond to it? So it can be useful to keep in mind. But yeah, sometimes with those really intimate songs that feel very vulnerable, I have to really go into a very like insular place. But yeah, I suppose that I don't know if I've ever been too worried about people hearing my vulnerability. I think that's something that's always drawn me towards making music. And I think back to the first songs I ever wrote when I was 17, 18, and just feeling like, oh, wow, this is actually an opportunity for me to express myself. So I think instead of feeling kind of put off by the prospect of that, it can feel quite thrilling. And I'm just a bit of an open book in life as well. Like I can have my guard up with like new people, but with all of my friends, I'll tell them anything. And I think it's such an essential, like, it's an essential part of my like human experience is to like be open and to receive and to be open also to like other people in return. I don't know if that answers your question. I feel like I completely rambled, but
No, it does. I love to hear that. I think it's a great way to be in life, because I think when you put out the energy of being quite open, you often get really interesting interactions because people can tell that it's a safe space. It makes them open up too.
I hope so. I think sometimes people can be like, whoa, like that's a lot. But no, I think a big part of my like artistic journey up until this point has been, I think one of my big kind of motivators with making art is to encourage people to feel a little bit more, or to kind of have acceptance for their feelings a bit more and embrace their feelings. And I've just always been a big feeler. And I think like growing up somewhere like London and being in like English culture, which I feel like it can often be quite like stiff upper lip, everything's fine. And I think temperamentally, I'm quite different to that. I'm a bit more, emotional, and I'm a big crier, and I just feel things a lot. And I think I always wanted to feel like I and the people around me could express themselves more than the kind of stifling approach allows for, if that makes sense.
Definitely. Tell me a little bit about growing up in London. Was that something that you felt that being a big feeler wasn't allowed?
A little bit. I think, I don't know, now I've spent a lot of time in America, I do feel like there is a slightly different vibe in terms of like how much you're supposed to at least like show your feelings. I think, I also, my heritage is I grew up with, like my dad is from a Jamaican background, and I think that similarly to English culture, obviously like probably for colonial reasons, is a very much like, I don't know, I feel like Jamaicans are also big feelers, but there is often like a kind of attitude of like, I don't know, like a kind of reluctance to be too open about certain things, or like to talk too much about things from the past and stuff. Or at least in my family, I think that's been a bit of a thing. And I just think like, I also think it's generational. And I think people more, like younger people in our generation, I think are liberating ourselves slightly from this idea that like you have to just keep calm and carry on. But I do think it's such an English tradition. I do see how that can be positive, and like, it's a message of resilience, but it's also like, I think it can be quite insidious as well. And I just think like the best things that have happened in my life have happened because I've been open and allowed myself to be vulnerable and allowed myself to feel and express myself. And it really upsets me when like I see other people around me who are close to me, or even like, I don't know, people I don't know as well, not seeming like they can have access to that like openness. And I think, we all need to just feel more and be like comfortable with sharing it. And I think like so many sinister societal factors stop us from, particularly in like certain minority groups and things like that, like stop us from being able to feel like we can do that.
That's a really good idea to think about some of the best things that have happened in your life, and actually like the behaviors or situations that led to that. Because I often think that we just think about circumstances of things, good things happening and them landing on our laps. Tell me about some of the best things that you feel have happened to you, and like how your openness like contributed to that.
Falling in love is like, that's like the best thing that ever happens to anyone, I think. And I think about like falling in love with my partner, who I've been with now for a good few years, and I was very like heart on my sleeve through that process, and like sent her a song that I'd written about her very early, and kind of was like, this is how I feel. And and all my friends were kind of telling me like, don't be ridiculous, don't send her the song. And then I was like, no, I'm just going to do it. And here we are today, but also just like my having this career and being able to like make music for a living, and now writing novels as well. I think like trying to be fearless and just like give it everything I've got, and that, I don't always succeed in that, and it can be difficult, but all of the good things that have happened in my career have come from me releasing music that sometimes is like, really vulnerable, or and all of it is true to my experience in some way, or true to my personal feelings, and like so much good has come from that in my life. So openness, man.
Yeah, you're so right. Falling in love does take a lot of a big bit of a fearless jump, because it's just openness and vulnerability, and you don't know if you're going to get the chance that you take deliver. But it's fantastic to try, and that's the same as doing anything creative, right? You have to put yourself out there. I'm really interested in the kind of ways, whether we're like artists or not, that we define ourselves, or these labels we put on ourselves, like I'm an open book, or oh, I'm shy, I'm a bit more introverted. And I always think that's interesting. We find a label and then kind of act within those confines, and find it hard to move outside, or think that there are skills or qualities that maybe we don't possess. And I love that one of your EPs is called Sensitive Soul, and actually like sensitivity is something that you embrace and say, because I think when you are creative, I sometimes feel like being sensitive will often be used as something that's negative, like I'm a bit too sensitive. But actually, I'm trying to view that more as it being my superpower that enables me to be quite imaginative and empathetic. Tell me about why you called that EP that, and like, do you identify as being a very sensitive person?
I identify as being a sensitive person, and I've definitely been accused of being sensitive in a way, like you're saying, that it feels like it has a negative implication. But then I also feel like that word has been applied to me by people in my life in a positive way. So I do think it's one of those words that can, I don't know, really go both ways in that sense. It feels like so long ago that EP came out, but it is music that I'm still really proud of, and I love playing. I only play a couple of those songs live now, but they're songs that I feel like elicit a lot of good energy from the crowd, and which always feel really kind of fun to play. And I think that EP, there's songs across the spectrum of sensitivity, but I think they are all pulled together by that feeling. I also, as much as I'm like proud of being a sensitive person, and I think people should be allowed to be sensitive, I am cautious about getting the balance right, because I do think sensitivity can be like weaponized. And if you're a sensitive person, you can I think it's a feeling that can like almost sometimes limit the feelings of other people around you. I would never want to be so sensitive that someone didn't feel like they could tell me the truth about something, if that makes sense. So yeah, when I put that EP out, I was just coming out of uni, so I was probably like 21-ish. So it's been a while, and I do think since releasing it, I have had a bit of a evolution in terms of I feel very different, but I also feel very similar. But I think I'm a bit more like self-aware of like maybe being sensitive and just about like the person I am, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was thinking so much about the collection of emotions and energies in your music. And so much of it is about sensitivity, openness, vulnerability, connection. But also a big one is hope. Like I find a huge amount of Hope Handwritten as an album is about how to cultivate hope and excitement for life, whatever life throws at you. And thinking, kind of going back to what we were saying about how we define ourselves, I was interested if you feel like being called Hope changed who you are as a person. Do you feel like that's something that's really made you who you are?
That's such an interesting question. I have thought about this before. I think that hope is a really essential ingredient to the creative process for anyone. And I think that interacting with hope is an inescapable thing for artists. Like there's so much rejection that comes with this like career path, whatever medium you're working within. There's so much also like so much internal kind of strife and existential questions and kind of self-criticism and stuff. So I am really interested in the concept of hope, not just because it's my name, but every artist, every serious creative person will come into contact in some way with the question of hope, and having to be resilient and keep going and believe in something that is kind of bigger than them, which is, their art in general. With Hope Handwritten, obviously it's the clues in the name, and a lot of the songs all of the songs engage in some way with hope. But also my book, I think, also really engages with the question of hope. I'm realizing more and more. I definitely keep coming back to it. But I think it's just so essential to, I'm probably the human experience, not just the creative experience, but I do think it's really integral to the creative experience too.
Yeah, it's been really great to listen to that and have a little bit of be thinking about hope more as an emotion myself. So thank you for making that. It's been interesting to think about. And the other part of the album is, of course, like handwritten. And I was wondering if that was part of your writing process. Like, are you a pen to paper person?
Yeah, I write most of my songs on paper when I'm at least kind of doing the first draft. And I just love pen and paper. Like, I don't do any phone calendars. So like I just have been using like moleskins and stuff since I was at university. I'm such like I love a physical planner. Yeah, I wrote a lot of these songs by hand and then kind of I'll put them in my phone later. But I do feel like the blank page in a kind of physical, tangible sense is such a, I don't know, such a motivator for me. I feel like it can be really different when it's that like physical, tangible thing rather than just being like on a screen. Book-wise, I write a lot more on like my laptop. But I do a lot of like stream of consciousness. If I'm feeling stuck, I love to get out a pen and just force myself to write for 2 pages or whatever to kind of get the cogs whirring.
Hello, it's me, Freya, just letting you know that you can now buy my debut novel, A Real Piece of Work. It's a book about sisters, complicated families, and what happens to grief when it becomes a collective experience. You can now buy A Real Piece of Work wherever you buy your books, and if you go in store to Foyles, you'll receive a limited edition cotton bandana while stocks last. If you prefer to listen to your books, then you can get it as an audiobook. Happy reading! So tell me a little bit about your book. Where are you with it now? I'm so excited to read it. We have the same agent and Liv has been talking to me about it nonstop and what a talent you are. So can't wait.
Oh, she's the best. We're so lucky to have her.
Yeah, we really are.
I've just started edits with the editors at the publishing houses, which has been it's been a really, really surreal process, like writing the book, selling it, and now like having it taken so seriously that it's like being edited is just so surreal and cool. So there's a long way to go. It's not coming out till I think February 2028. So it feels like ages away, but lots of work to do. And I love editing. It's my favorite part of the process. So I've been enjoying getting stuck back into that.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier with Hope Handwritten how much drafting was involved in that. How was drafting with music and with a novel really different? And I'd read an interview that said that when you first took your album to your label, they were like, it's 60% there, go away again. I mean, what did that feel like? I've been there with the book, so I know, but tell me what you were thinking at that moment.
I was horrified. I literally was like, wait, what do you mean? Like, and I'd only been working on the album at that point for 3 months. So it was so early in the process, but I really had felt like I'd made this amazing project. So I was having an absolute crisis over it. And then I had a long conversation with my parents on the phone. I'm very close with both my parents and they're very like integral to my, like, you know, having gotten to this point with my career. I think they're very supportive and talk things through with me a lot. But yeah, I was horrified. And then after having this conversation and really thinking about it for a day or whatever, I really felt galvanized to make it better. And I think the reason I was so horrified was because I knew that they were right. So I wasn't like, oh my God, wait, there's no way. I think it wouldn't have struck a nerve if I didn't in some way agree with them. Yeah, and then I was able to I spent a lot, years after that making new songs and shuffling things around. While that came with a lot of frustration, I learned so much and the album is so much better for it. Only 2 songs from that initial draft made it onto the final album and there's 16 songs on the final album. So there was a lot of change and I actually learned that I really enjoyed that process of really like spending a lot of time working on something and thinking about it and making it as good as I possibly could. So, and also I think it again was like a really helpful, I learned a lot of helpful lessons for what then would become like the book writing process as well. And I relentlessly self-edit, like even before I sent the manuscript to like Liv and agents and stuff, I did so much editing and have just found so much joy in that process. And that for me, I'm learning is like where 90% of the creativity happens is like tinkering endlessly with that first version of the draft. Yeah, I think it's just like lessons you have to learn as a creative is that editing is really important, probably in any medium. I don't know much about like visual art or anything like that, but I would imagine it's just integral. I'm now in a place where I feel so much better for it artistically.
That's really inspiring to you say that, because I think it's really easy to feel like editing is just a complete burden and the worst and so technical, but actually that's a real joy to be able to tinker and finesse and let the details really flourish. And I think sometimes as much as what you write is also what you don't, and the space that you give on the page or in a song, an ability to let things breathe. And that really comes with a good edit. I suppose it also goes back to what you were saying about being sensitive, like having sensitivity is a superpower, but also being able to be open to other people's feedback and criticism. I often find I need a beat or a minute to be able to step back from something and think, do I feel so strongly because I know this person is right and I'm scared of the work? Or do I really feel like I need to push back on something? And usually after a
Yeah.
day, you're like, no, they're completely right. And so it's also a helpful skill to then be able to be like, okay, well, how do I go next time I'm writing and anticipate this feedback? How do I like learn from what people are saying to be able to do that on my own in the editing process? Which it sounds like you were doing a lot of before you were even at that point for your book.
I think you're completely right that, not all constructive criticism is actually, well, it's all helpful, but you don't necessarily have to implement all of it. And I think that kind of process of finding your creative center enough and trusting yourself enough to know what criticism to take on board and what to leave that takes a really long time. For me, that's definitely taken a long time, but I do feel like I'm in that place where I can have kind of that have like enough perspective to be able to kind of distinguish between what feels right and what doesn't. And then sometimes, you try to implement something and it doesn't work and you have to go back to the drawing board. But of course, like taking on criticism and allowing yourself to kind of collaborate with people in that way is really beneficial. But you can't do it unless you have, or you can't do it as well if you don't have that kind of creative center to really kind of ground you and ultimately like have the knowledge that you as the artist should have like the final say with things.
Creative center is such a good way to put it, because actually that's really what we need to kind of build and cultivate. And I'm interested how you hold on to that and develop a creative center when you're also entering a lot of situations as a musician where you have to collaborate with people. I was really interested reading an interview with you where you were talking about what it's like to turn up to a studio, meet someone for the first time. There must be so much excitement about getting to collaborate with someone. But then they're also like, okay, so tell me what's going on with you. And you're having to share a lot of personal experiences. What's that like? And how do you retain a sense of your creative center when you're in situations like that?
I've definitely kind of had my ups and downs with that. And I would say when making Hope Handwritten, I was really kind of encouraged by my label to take kind of every possible session with every producer and songwriter that I could. And that was amazing because it meant I learned so much, got to meet some really amazing people, and being able to collaborate with new people always feels exciting, and I feel very lucky to be able to do it. But I've learned that doing too much of that kind of back to back to back, they call it kind of like speed dating in the music industry, when you're like being put in sessions with all these different people. I really did lose my creative center for a while. And I think that's part of the reason why Hope Handwritten took me so long to make, because I just didn't quite have that grounding within myself. So I think going forwards, I've learned that like my process needs to look a bit different there. It can definitely be difficult to meet someone for the first time and then just kind of have to bare your heart and soul. And I think I've learned that it really depends on the person. And I really try to kind of cultivate relationships with collaborators that feel like friendships, that feel, mutually trusting and respectful. And I've learned that now sometimes, if I'm working with a new person, it's just not going to happen on day one, and that's okay. It might take a few times to get it right. It might not end up being the right person at all, but I'm good at like saying no. So if I don't feel comfortable in a situation, say if I go to a songwriting session and I don't really want to talk about my life, like I now don't have a problem kind of being vocal about that. And also I sometimes I don't always write songs that are like specifically about myself. I think it can be a fun experiment sometimes to write about, I don't know, other people or like an imaginary situation. And I think that can be like a good thing to lean on in those situations where I don't necessarily feel like I want to harp on about myself again. I think it's all about, that creative center again, and being able to feel grounded in ultimately like what feels right for you as a creative. But then the flip side of that is that sometimes it is good to really push yourself and challenge yourself. But it's about like that line between what's challenging yourself and what is kind of pushing you towards discomfort in a way. And it can all be really difficult to navigate. But I think just kind of trusting your gut and trusting yourself and doing what feels right. But it can be a difficult one.
Doing what feels right and challenging yourself without giving yourself emotional whiplash too much.
Totally. Yeah. That can be really easy to slip into as a creative, I think, when you're collaborating. But it's also can be such a pleasure, and it can be such a learning experience. And yeah, I think like without collaboration, I wouldn't be able to have a career. And it obviously looks very different across mediums. It's like obviously with writing a book, you're so on your own until you get to the point where you're getting feedback from your agent or from your editors. Whereas with music, I find that the collaboration happens a lot earlier, which sometimes can feel, challenging.
I wanted to go back to something you said about trusting your gut, because when I was researching you, one of the things that really surprised and interested me was that you did a degree in English literature and then got offered a master's at Cambridge to continue that path, and actually decided to commit to music at that point. And now having a book, and it went through this amazing auction, there's been a lot of buzz about it. You're kind of re-entering the literary world, but through a different door. But that must have been a big decision and a big moment. Do you have any advice for people about how you trust your gut?
Oh, I think my advice would be to just trust your gut. I think that would be the advice. I think like your gut is such a crucial instrument as a creative person. And sometimes it might not lead you exactly in the direction you want to go in, but it's ultimately really all you have. Yes, you have the people that are around you and hopefully a support system and collaborators and things like that. But I think it's really important to trust yourself. But yeah, it's again something that I succeed and also fail in. And sometimes I don't trust my gut and then I really regret it. And then sometimes I do trust my gut and I'm looking back thinking, oh, what if I'd done it differently? But yeah, that's kind of, I just think that's the process of being an artist, is like grappling with that contention.
And one of the things that you must be grappling with all the time is, you know, being so ambitious and having so many talents, wanting to write a book and write more music, collaborate with people, perform. How do you juggle doing everything? Do you ever feel that kind of hungry ambition of being young, of just wanting to succeed in everything? And how do you let your dreams line up in a nice little order? Because it must have been hard to be like, I'm going to commit to music at this age. I'm sure there were people around you saying, you know, go and get your master's, do that. But you made a decision and it worked out. And now other opportunities are coming along as well.
I was actually so lucky that no one told me to do the masters. Everyone was like, Cambridge has been there for hundreds of years. It's not going anywhere. You can go later. So I was really, really lucky because I think that was the right advice. You know, you can always, I mean, obviously education is so important, but I was lucky enough that I had gotten an undergraduate degree. And so I think I never have regretted that decision of not doing the masters. But even though I'm sure I would have loved it, I just think I can do it hopefully later down the line if they give me a place again, or maybe somewhere else. But yeah, sometimes in life you find yourself at a crossroads, and it can be, you know, you might have to be weighing up two options that feel like quite difficult to decide between. But for me, that was definitely a no-brainer. And I just think with something like music, I'd put out this EP, Sensitive Soul, and it was getting a bit of buzz around it in a very kind of small underground way. But I really felt like I had to take the opportunity because it you know, unlike Cambridge, might not be there waiting for me on the other side of a master's, or, you know, a year later or whatever. So it definitely felt like a no-brainer. But it has been really amazing to be able to write a book and to have really like allowed myself the space to be like limitless. And I think sometimes the world can kind of tell you to pick one thing. You know, we contain multitudes, and there's no rules that say like you have to just do music, you have to just do writing. So yeah, it's been really amazing. And I think I also thrive the most and I'm happiest when I'm working across different projects. Like when I was writing Sensitive Soul, for example, just before I signed my first record deal, I was still at uni and writing my dissertation, and I was just so happy. Yeah, I was just really fulfilled by the combination of both of the things. And I also think it can be quite creatively productive, because when I really don't want to work on a song or like make a TikTok, I'll work on my book, and then vice versa. It's like you have the other avenue to kind of escape into when you don't want to work on the other thing. So